Hi, how is everyone? Is everyone good? Everyone hear me now? Okay, great. I got a little discombobulated when I went to open the streaming software. It had forgotten my profiles, and I had to go through the settings and pull them up again. So it had somehow decided that it was starting a whole new thing, and I'm not ready to start a whole new thing yet. And neither are you, I'm guessing. So let me formally welcome you to Disorganized Play. Clearly, we're living up to the name today, but that's not going to stop us from getting the job done. So, we are at sort of a momentous occasion here. We are finally getting back, or at least we're getting done with Chapter 1. It is time to move on, and there are some big decisions to make, so we are going to talk about that today. Um, yeah, so it feels like after literally 12 episodes of analyzing and dissecting Chapter 1, it feels a little weird to be moving on, but it also feels good to be moving on. But before we can do that, let's address the close of Chapter 1 and the events in Nightstone and what's going on. So, for those of you who were not able to tune in on Thursday, I'm going to give a brief recap of the recap. I guarantee you it will not go 45 minutes like it did last time, but I would let you know. I'll just catch you up quickly on where things are at. So, the party essentially liberated Nightstone from the orcs, woke up the next morning, kind of cut a deal with Kella, or not necessarily cut a deal with Kella, but she said, I owe you favors. I'm indebted to you. You can have this necklace, but that's the least thing, that I can do. So, please, I'm grateful to you for saving me from those orcs. Also, talked to Morak. I wasn't very well prepared for what Morak was going to say to them, and I also was a little surprised that I think 3 of the 6 party members are Zentarim. So he essentially tipped his hand that he's also a Zentarim, which is something that we've been talking about, but is not formally called out in the book. So that's my choice to make that play. I'm happy to run a Zentarim campaign. I think that I need to talk to at least 2 of the members of the party are Harpers, and that might be a very head-to-head kind of... that might cause some inter-party strife in terms of trying to accomplish things. On the other hand, they're still level 4, so they have the opportunity to rebuild their characters and change their faction if they so choose. I believe that's allowed under AL rules. I think you can change everything except your name. So that's that. They went and talked to Jorgen, who is, of course, the secret... not secret, but he's the Frost Giant. He is actually Harshnag. He is going to be making a reappearance earlier, but he had been captured by the Cult of the Dragon and bound and tortured in the Dripping Caves by the goblins, where the PCs found him and liberated him. So that was a remarkably short and direct recap of how that happened. They talked to Jorgen, and one of the first things Jorgen said when he woke up, when they finally roused him from, he had been poisoned. It's fairly well established that, I made it clear, that he had been poisoned by this thing called Night Root, and he was like, "Where's my stuff? Thanks for liberating me, but I need my axe and the rest of my stuff." But specifically, he called out his axe and told them, it's huge. It's this huge axe. In their course of conversation, they're like, "Well, we didn't see it." He's like, "You would have seen it. You would know if you had found it. But there's places in those caves that are too big or too tiny for me to go. I can't get in there. So if you can get in there and get my axe, I will find a way to make it right for you." So that all of that stuff that I just recapped in the past 5 minutes took about an hour or so to kind of play out. They then departed for the Dripping Caves, and essentially what I have chosen to do is take the encounter bundle from the cloud giant castle, Zephyros's magical taxi service. I've decided to remove those encounters and replace them with this dungeon area where the nightroot poison that they were using on Jorgen is actually being manufactured. So there's this, what I've decided is this Duergar outpost that is working with the cult of the dragon, and they are they're the opposition that needs to be cleared out, and they're not going to have his axe. The man in the party hasn't gotten that far yet. They're not going to have his axe, but they're going to have a little bit more information and a lead on his axe, which I don't know that I want the party to follow up on, but it is a way of satisfying like what happened to Jorgen's axe and what can we do to find it. So that's fine. That's the idea. So last week, having got an idea that they wanted to go back into the Dripping Caves, that prompted us to do this whole sudden, like, let's rip these encounters out that are in the Cloud Castle, and let's punch that XP in someplace else. Is it 100% AL legal kosher? Probably not. We do get some leeway to like make things tougher, but I don't think that I'm replacing this stuff with anything significantly harder or different than what they have in the book. So the AL police can come after me for, fire up the sirens. I'm ready to be put into the virtual dungeon of bad GMs. So that's the recap of, so they went in, they tried to go in, this party tries to be stealthy, and they are not very good at it, which is becoming kind of like their trademark move of, we're going to sneak in. Guess what? One of us blew our stealth roll. We're no longer sneaking in. Instead, the party is really spread out. So I don't know what to do about that. Probably nothing. Is it worth having a talk with them about rebuilding their characters? I already said in our private Facebook group, like, you guys should think about whether you want to be a stealth party or not. I think in this particular instance, the fighter/rogue just accidentally, he got a bad roll and botched his check, which, okay, that's fine. So they botched their stealth check. The Duergar that they encountered, I have another little map for you guys. It's a juicy day to be tuning in to the Disorganized play. It's not super juicy, but I will. So this is where they ended up. This is a quick sketch of where they ended up. To this, what I would consider the south. If the top of the screen is the north, to the south there's a larger cavern where Duergar are packing up 2 different wagons. And they got into this fight in that cavern with 4 Duergar. One of them was posted up on guard, and the other 3 were packing up this wagon. And they got into a fight with those guys, and BSB Care says maybe I should actually allow them to sneak up on someone. Maybe one day I will fulfill their dream of actually being competent. That's not my DMing style, so let's not count on that anytime soon. So, they got into a fight in this cavern, made a lot of noise. The guys who were packing up this stuff, whatever it was, and packing up this stuff into these wagons, yelled, "We got company!" over their shoulder. And then when the combat was over and they defeated these 4 Duergar, the party was like, I'm going to search the wagon. I'm going to loot the bodies. I'm going to blah, blah. Like, they spent a few minutes basically looting and kind of checking stuff. And they figured out, okay, this looks like some sort of alchemical/poisoner's kit, like a very elaborate lab, and that looks like the source of the nightroot. It's the equipment that you would use to brew or distill nightroot, but it's all been dismantled and packed up and put in boxes and that sort of stuff. So that was an important piece of information for them to get. Unfortunately, it also allowed the Duergar that were still inside the complex to formulate a plan. I don't like to punish guys for just being adventurers and doing their thing. On the other hand, I feel like it's my job to increase the difficulty or deploy consequences when it's clear that somebody said, "Hey, we got company," and he yells over his shoulder, and then no one else showed up. Something probably happened, guys. So that's... I don't feel crappy about setting up an ambush, and that's exactly what happened. So they came in from the south area. They walked in. The lab is to the west here. There was a set of double doors to the east that they didn't really look at. They kind of got down into this kind of packed up or half packed up lab area to the east, and then a guy popped around one of the corners here and either threw a javelin or yelled at them, or he initiated combat while most of the party was in this hallway, in the southern end of the hallway, but not really fully in there. They got initiative on him. I rolled terrible. I rolled a 4, and so he after taking a couple of hits, he's like, "Screw this," and he retreated and went around the northernmost corner here where it's not filled in. He went up to the very north and then around the corner to the east. The party gave chase on their next turn, which of course is exactly what he wanted them to do. And when it all ended up, it ended up looking like this. So the blue dots are the PCs. I must be missing one because oh yeah, there's one over here in this hallway to the right. I forgot to put that dot on the map. So the Duergar, of course, have hulked out. They've become large size. And they've now sandwiched these guys deeper into the complex and prevented their exit from getting back out to the way that they came. They do not know what is to the east whatsoever. They knew when we ended combat that one of the Duergar had yelled basically in Dwarvish, like, "We got them where we want them, boys! Release Flame Spindle!" Well, that hasn't happened yet, but it's going to. It turns out that these Duergar have a young red dragon caged up in their complex that they use for whatever, and Flame Spindle is going to be released and quite probably kill the Dwarven Ranger. It depends. It depends upon which way they send this dragon. But they've got him bottled up. There are a couple of doors that lead deeper into the complex that potentially have more Duergar behind them. Obviously, somebody is brewing this poison, and it would only make sense that maybe somebody who's in league with the Cult of the Dragon might be lurking about. So there are more forces out here. I'm a little concerned about the party because they have used a significant amount of their resources, for one thing, and also the Bard is going to be missing this week, which he's one of the more experienced players, and he has some area of effect attacks, so he may be a crucial element that's missing. So I may have to try and adjust to this encounter on the fly. It's going to be a little interesting because not only are there regular doors where guys can pop out and surprise or give them choke points, but there's a ton of secret doors in here. In fact, what I've decided is that some of the weapons that they can earn through Chapter 1, like a Goblin Render, so the Goblin Render's a +1 longsword, like that's pretty sweet. But that's actually in a hidden compartment behind the wall in the poisoner's in the main bad guy's lair. So there's a lot of little alcoves and treasure troves in this particular map that are behind secret doors. And when we talk about secrets, that's what I want to talk about here briefly, which is how do you deal with secrets? The party level is they're level 4. They're supposed to be level 5 by the time we're all done with this. They did a decent job of handling orcs. Technically, these Duergar are also only CR2 and should be able to handle what's going on. The red dragon, the young red dragon, it will be a little bit of a challenge for them, especially because they're missing a guy. So that will be interesting to see what happens. I need to throw him at them right away. I always believe, like, lead off with your strong guys so that if you need to make your weaker guys weaker, you can, or if you need to not send them in or scale back on your forces. So, I mean, that's going to happen first thing tomorrow night is those double doors drop and the dragon opens up and, you know, they're going to have to either come around the corner and try and hope that they connect with this dragon, or they're going to have to fall back because right now the Dwarven Ranger is between the large Duergar in the center of the intersection, and the double doors there is where the dragon is going to pop out. So that character is in some serious trouble where he is right now, and unless the party decides to team up on those two Duergar back there, and somehow help out and get a wedge in on them choking off the exit and choking off that hallway, like it can be ugly back there, right? So that's interesting. Question with magic items: do you ever have bad guys actually using the items that the party is supposed to pick up? Would I use the sword against the party? I might. It's not a decision that I've made this time. I think it's like this +1 longsword is. I don't have where it says they're supposed to find it or what it's supposed to be the reward for. I don't have that right in front of me. I think like the +1 longsword is a cool thing that you could have. A bad guy wielding, and you can set up a thing where like you see he raises this sword and there's bright blue runes that flare up all along the length of the blade, and then everybody at the table is going to be like, oh, I want that. Oh, he's got a magic sword. I want that sword. I think that's okay. I don't know whether it would tip the encounter too much for him to have it. So I am a fan of not just necessarily like finding treasure, but in this particular case, like I want them to work for it a little bit more than just you loot this thing off of this guy's body. I am going to have them find the Tressym, and what I've decided is that they are keeping the Tressym as a pet, but it's more like as you know, now that I think about it, more as like a bait dog for the dragon to kind of toy with. So it's got all of these like scorch marks and scars and things like that. So they're going to have to earn its trust in order to get it to be a member of the party. It's a little gruesome and depressing, but I think it's a nice way to make up for that. Like, oh, he's just wandering around town and he's shy. Like makes it. He's a little more traumatized, but I like the idea that they have like found this Tressym and they have it tied up and they use it like a bait dog, like you would for dogfighting. Well, like you would not do for dogfighting, because dogfighting is awful. But these are Duergar; they're awful people. So yeah, I think I think it just makes. I also want to have them learn the lesson that, like, sometimes you have to search for, you have to go out of your way to find something. Not everything's going to be handed to you right there. And if you go through the rest of this map, there is there's a lake. There's a small, not necessarily like a full-on lake, but there's a pool. There's a decent-sized pool on this map and that sort of thing. So I think giving them some hooks to provide further exploration. If worse comes to worse, I can put it on a different guy, right? If they don't find it, or I can have, Chulton Helmstar in Waterdeep tell them like, "Oh, you did such a good job. I want you to have this," or maybe Jorgen hands it out to them. So in this case, it's not necessarily like withholding treasure from them. It's just more that if I have to put on the Santa hat and hand it out, I will. But I'd like them to do some good old-fashioned dungeoneering, search for some secret doors. That's really what it comes down to. So I think that's a little bit of what I wanted to cover in terms of like the secrets aspect of it. Like, number one, give them something. Number one, have some outs for yourself if they don't search, like we just discussed. But number two, and maybe more importantly than number one, give them a few hooks of things to search for. So when they search an area, I do believe that those rolls should be made by the DM behind the DM screen, because I absolutely hate the metagaming aspect of somebody goes, "Oh, I'm gonna." There's a weird tapestry over there. I'm gonna search that part of the wall, and then they roll a 4, and somebody else at the table goes, "I'll search." Like that sort of metagaming drives me crazy. I think it's better to say, like, if you guys both want to search, great. I will roll at advantage. That seems fair. And then tell them, like, you don't notice anything unusual about this wall, or there's something a little weird about the way that the seam in the bookcase lines up with the seam in the mortar of the stone behind it, but you can't quite pinpoint what it might be. And then you have an opportunity for them to do further investigation. So it goes back to that classic type of that classic type of, when they fail, give them more information if appropriate, right? So that's something to keep in mind. Is it should never be a straight up like, you find it or there's nothing there. If they roll really badly, if they roll a 5 or below or whatever like that, then okay, that's fine. It's also fine to give that answer sometimes, because then when they search someplace that doesn't have anything, you can go, you didn't find anything. Although I have also been known when they get so Zenar Faith brings up the question: how do you spurn the players on how do you spurn the players on so that they don't bog down with momentum? And if they're in an area that just clearly doesn't have secret doors, and they've started to waste my time, like, I will metagame let them know. Like, I will roll I will roll dice. Do I have some dice? Hey, I happen to have some dice with me. So they will be like, "Oh, okay, well, I'm gonna search for secret doors," and I'll be like, "Oh yeah, you don't find any." Like, just don't even look at the dice. That's one way that I will sort of tip my hand, like, that's not cool, or that's just not going to happen. Let's move on. I agree that it can be a time killer. I don't want them to spend a lot of time picking this place apart, but I want them to be alert to the fact that there may be more going on than they think. So, have you thought about mentally upping the difficulty for the second roll if someone does that metagaming? No, I guess I don't necessarily. I don't know. I think that problem is largely solved by having the DM roll behind the screen and just collecting results. That's really a straightforward way to do it. I do like to do a lot of my rolls in the open, so this is kind of an exception to that particular instance. But if you can remember to do those rolls for them, then then I think it's fine, and not to change the difficulty. Like essentially just have them make it an advantage or whatever. I don't think you need to like. I think that's the better way to address that sort of metagaming rather than going, well, now it's going to be harder to search because, harder to find just because you know that he rolled a 4. Then you get into an antagonistic DM player type of situation, and that's a difficult road once you start down that path. Then it really gets it gets a little. It introduces a dynamic that you can essentially what that means is the players start to lose trust in the objectivity of the DM, and when that happens, then they start doing stuff like planning a bunch of stuff behind your back and like thinking of like, and they also don't believe, like, the key thing when there's a breach of the DM and player trust, the key thing is that they do not feel that they are earning whatever rewards they are getting, and they feel like the odds are stacked against them, that they're actually having to work harder than they should, or that they're being punished for doing their job, which is playing their character to the best of their ability, right? When that player DM trust is broken, you have a very hard time bringing the non-aggressive or irritated. I'm trying to search for the right word here, but your players, you get into a competitive type of situation between the DM and the players, and some of that can be okay when you're having a fight or whatever. But you can deploy that sort of competitive environment without having to tweak stats behind the scenes, without having to tweak the difficulty of a roll or whatever. You can do that just by deploying better tactics or whatever. There's ways that you can make encounters challenging and challenging yet fair, right? Like that's the tricky part of the DM, is the DM has so much power that as soon as the players have any kind of inkling that the game is being rigged against them on a meta level, then they get very suspicious and they get on pins and needles, and then that just causes them to metagame and min-max even more. So be careful of going down that path and deciding, okay, I'm going to make this a little harder than it needs to be. Admittedly, I may have done that just by rejiggering all the encounters at the end of the chapter here, right? Maybe so. But I feel like this is it's more interesting than what was going to happen. It's more interesting than the encounters that were planned to happen. They were given a chance to infiltrate this place somewhat stealthily, although it could have been difficult. And so it is probably more challenging than what they were looking at, but it's more interesting and it's still fair in my opinion. So that's the thing with changing metagame type of circumstances and whatnot. This promises to be a difficult combat. I think they should, it would be a great way to earn their chapter rewards if they find them all. If not, then I'm going to have to figure out a way later on down the line. But I think it will work out. So 2:35. So we're about half an hour in here. I would like to move on to the hooks to chapter 2 and then picking a path in chapter 2, right? So hooks to chapter 2. In my party, like I said, at least 3 of the guys are Zens. So let's talk about what the hooks to chapter 2 are right out of the book. So right out of the book, Morak, once they liberate the city, Morak says, hey guys, can you, depending upon where they go, he says, go to Icewind Dale and tell so-and-so, Markham Southwell, that his sister was killed in the attack. If the DM has chosen to send them to Golden Fields, then go tell Miros that the Zelbrun's Tressum is still alive. And finally, if the DM is sending them to Triboar, Morak asks the characters to travel to Triboar and deliver the news of Darthag Ulgar, who was eaten by giant rats, his passing to Alestra Ulgar. So essentially, a lot of it is either drop off this magical cat, or in 2 of the 3 cases, it is go tell someone that something bad happened. So that's fine. It's a little bit like, couldn't you just use a sending stone to disseminate this news? Although, like, I get it. Like, he's asking them to do this out of the goodness of their heart. And those are the 2 issues that I have with these particular hooks, is that it's not particularly compelling in terms of what you are tasked with doing. Go deliver some news. Okay. And then there's no real monetary reward attached to this, unless I've missed something in the end of the book, end of the chapter here. Which, admittedly, my story is taking a different tack, so I haven't been paying close attention to exactly what Morak is supposed to be doing. Like, Morak's also not a Zentrum by the book, right? So that's where a big difference has introduced itself, a big wrinkle that has introduced itself in my campaign, where I've got the opportunity to use this alliance and use the characters who are members of the Zents and use that as a hook into whatever they want to do, right? So, so I've got a pretty strong hook into Triboar. I've decided to go into Triboar. We're gonna talk about that. But the hooks that I have ahead of me to get the party motivated, I could have Jorgen, the Frost Giant, give them a mission or ask them to do something. One thing that we have established that from their interrogation or from talking to Jorgen is that there's another monolith in Triboar, so they already have some motivation to go there and investigate. And I think if they say, oh, well, we want to go see if this other, monolith made out of whatever it is, we want to see if that's also intact, if that's been attacked. Then Morak has the opportunity to go, oh, well, if you're going there anyway, can you do this, take this? One of the other things that's coming out of this last encounter here, which I think we can get rid of at this point, one of the other things coming out of this poisoner's lab is the last 2 casks of ale, right? So I've talked about this before. Maybe Morak has some contraband inside one of those casks that he has either been waiting for or needs to deliver to someone or whatever, or that he needs to sign off on or exchange. Like, he's going to receive this, great, I got it, now I'm going to pay, my other contact, I'm going to pay him in return for the stuff that he sent me, and then he includes some items in there and says, hey, can you take this to so-and-so, and I will pay you X amount of gold to do that. So we've got a couple different hooks. The monolith is in Triboar, the Jorgen may be headed north, and Morak and or one of the Zent agents may need someone to contact one of the Zents in Triboar. The other thing that I will point out about this particular setup here with the Duergar lair is there's going to be a piece of information in here that describes, essentially I've got a letter, right? So the letter is from the Cult of the Dragon to the guy who's running the poisoner operation. And I always, whenever I come across one of these things, it's always like, oh, you find a tattered page in the dictionary, blah, blah, blah. And it always feels a little hollow and a little short shrift on like what would be in an actual dictionary or whatever. In this particular case, I'm leaning on a technique that I've used before, which is someone's superior communicating to them, or it can be the other way around, where some subordinate is reporting to their superior. But typically it's an administrative type of note complaining about the working conditions of whatever's going on. And to me, this is a simple one-page thing that illuminates why the bad guys aren't as far along in their quest. It also gives me a reason to drop some information on the players about like, oh, what's happening, where did this go, what's up with these people, that sort of thing. So that's also, like, if you're looking for a way to drop plot information when your players are like straight up just murderers who do not interrogate anybody, then that's a great way to, like, I've written this type of note like over and over, but it is essentially like, don't worry, I know you haven't been paid in, as much as you should be, but by the way, da 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 da. In fact, why don't I just quick read you? I'm probably going to adjust this, but so this is to the poisoner guy, and it's from his boss essentially. And his boss says, "How dare you accuse me of improperly supplying you? 'Tis true the cult of the dragon has suffered some minor setbacks in recent months, but I assure you that the fees outstanding to you and your company shall be paid thrice over once we receive the first ransom payment from the giant's family." So this is all tying into like, oh, okay, who, let's confirm the information. Who captured Jorgen? Why were they holding him? Why didn't they kill him? Blah, blah, blah. Your point that it has been 6 months is well taken. However, as you well know, giants do not conduct themselves with the same urgency as most mortal races. All right, why is that line in there? I want to reinforce the idea that giants are not in a hurry to get anything done, right? Delarian is confident his family shall pay a pretty penny. We have reason to believe he is the blood of frost giant nobles. I just made that up. Delarian is some name, my boss, the big boss, a name you can chum in the water if they decide to follow up on it later. The fact that Jorgen might be a frost giant noble is kind of tipping the hand that, oh, well, maybe this guy is more than he appears to be. In the meantime, I have sent a partial payment of gold, your fair share from the sale of that massive axe. We didn't dare fence it in Waterdeep, it would have attracted too much attention. Fortunately, we found an anonymous buyer in Citadel Felbar. It is a pittance for what it had fetched on the open market, but we must settle for a lesser amount lest we tip our hands. So, this clears up the mystery of what happened to the axe. It got fenced to some anonymous buyer in Citadel Felbar. We now have actionable intelligence. We could go to Citadel Felbar and find out like who in the Cult of the Dragon might have done this thing, had a big wagon that was loaded down with this heavy axe or whatever. Like, the party could go act on this if they want to. The reason I picked Citadel Felbar is in my head, what I'm getting at here is the fire giants who are trying to start basically a war are like, whoa, there's this awesome giant axe that you found. We are willing to pay up to 500 gold pieces for that. Like, they would have paid more, right? But there's the meat of like what you get out of this letter is boom. Okay, well now we know what happened to the axe. You kind of alleviate or eliminate the question of, well, why are we down here? What are we looking for down here again? Okay, well we've got the information. Great. The claw of the dragon shall rise again. Blah blah blah. So that's to give you an idea of how you can structure clues and plot hooks and background exposition all into one very neat, tidy missive. I mean, someone makes a joke that this is the old medieval conference room sticky note. It sort of is that, but it feels very organic. If you wanted to make it more believable, I guess it could be encoded. If you have players who are like, oh, I want to run a cipher on this thing and try and figure it out. Like if you wanted to have that kind of puzzle challenge, I might actually end up doing that if I thought we didn't have to move on. Like, that would be, I've done it before, where you write something like this, and then you run a cipher on it and have the players kind of like figure out, like, oh, okay, we're doing a letter substitution, or it's every third word or something like that. So this is a fun way to drop information in a very compact and potent package that also has like some appeal, or potentially has some appeal, to people in your group who are the mystery solvers, the plot stringers, the puzzle solvers, that sort of thing. So think about, okay, in the sense of my wider world, where can I plug in some sort of communicator message? Because most people, unlike adventurers, aren't just wandering around from place to place all the time, right? Most people set up shop someplace and stay there and don't leave unless they are really on doing something very, very important, which means there's got to be some type of correspondence between them, right? Whatever form or shape that may take. So those are my hooks into, after a brief aside, those are my different hooks into Chapter 2. I may send them to Waterdeep and then have Charlton Helmstar, who they were originally tasked with working for. I may have him say, okay, well, you've performed spectacularly. Now I need you to take this to Earlham Stockspool in Triboar and deliver it to him. So let's talk in our last 15 minutes here about picking a path, because in Chapter 2 you essentially have to decide which of the 3 locations you're going to send your party to have them endure the Frost Giant, or not necessarily Frost Giant, but endure the giant assault on these 3 different locations that they've set up. So I quickly went through, and not super quickly, but I went through this afternoon and quickly went through the 3 areas and looked at, just number one, like, let's look at what forces are assaulting which area. So first of all, we start with Bryn Shander. That's way up north. It gets attacked by 12 frost giants and 2 winter wolves. I mean, I like the setup here. There's a number of different things that I don't like about the results of Bryn Shander. And for those of you who are backing our Patreon, and thank you for backing our Patreon, we just hit a goal to update our website, which we're in dire need of. But for those of you who are backing the Patreon at the $5 and up level, I put together a set of quest lines. So out of each of our 3 areas, I have made a list of which NPC drops the quest, where it takes place, what the reward is, and then if it has a connection into Chapter 3, going from left to right. So what cities it sends you to, what rewards come out of it, and then does it have any implications for Chapter 3. And so, if you want to read this off the screen or whatever, fine, but this is in the Patreon backers folder, this breakdown of what the various quests are. And sure, you can either just screen cap it or go through and make your own little list. Good for you. I've done that work for you. So I don't think the quest lines coming out of Bryn Shander or Golden Fields are particularly have as much treasure attached to them as the ones coming out of Triboar. I have a fairly significant issue with the quests that the Frost Giants are on. Like, if everything was equal, I would definitely send my party to Bryn Shander and have them fight 12 Frost Giants. That sounds awesome, and I like that they're kind of assaulting the city and whatnot. I don't know. Visually in my mind, the setup there is really cool. It's very iconic. But the quest lines coming out of it are so-so, or whatever. Like, I haven't looked at the quest lines of those other 2 very closely at all after I looked and saw that I wanted to send them to Triboar, and that's the quest lines, particularly for the magic items coming out of Triboar, are just way better. There's a Giant Slayer sword coming out of Triboar, and unless I've mistaken reading it, I don't see that quest line anywhere else. So that's significant. So I'm not going to speak in depth about the quest lines coming out of Bryn Shander and Golden Fields, but I will say the Frost Giants are on a quest for the Ring of Winter, right? Artem Simber had this thing. It supposedly made him immortal, and they want it for their own nefarious ends. I have gotten far enough into the book that I've gotten to the Frost Giant lair, and it says straight up, well, the Ring of Winter is not to be found in this adventure. It is being reserved for events that are going to take place in the future. And that is 100% like Wizards' right to like tie all these things together. I think that makes the world more coherent and cohesive and compelling, but it feels a little bit like a tease. You know, you've got these giants sailing around in these massive ships, and capturing dragons, all in this quest to find this thing that, like, as a DM, you don't even know where it actually is. And so if the players get on the tail of the Ring of Winter and try and figure out what happened to it, you're going to be hard-pressed to give them any clues or direction or hooks in terms of what actually where it might actually be. And I think if players get that into their head, like, oh, we got to find this thing before the Giants do, which seems to me to be a perfectly legitimate kind of take or desire or whatever you want to call it, then you're kind of painted into a corner. You're forced to do some improvisation that I think the Ring of Winter might be described in the DMG because I think it's an artifact, but the fact that there's no information in the book on what happens with it, unless it's in the magic item index, which I don't think it is. Let's take a quick look and see what magic items are available to our glorious players. And the Ring of Winter is not in here. So that's one of the reasons I'm not going to send my party to Bryn Shander, is I think you're set up for some potential problems. All right, that brings us to Golden Fields. Golden Fields gets attacked by 6 Hill Giants, 12 Ogres, 12 Bugbears, and 2 sets of 30 Goblins each. I like this. This has the potential to really be like the comedy of errors type of encounter, where all of these ogres and bugbears go over the wall and start grabbing like pumpkins and stuff and trying to throw it over the wall so that the hill giants can catch it. And then when all hell breaks loose, the hill giants get out these goblin hucker harnesses and they start hurling goblins over the wall and kind of start shelling Golden Fields. I think it has a potential to be a big goofy brawl against a bunch of forces that aren't necessarily particularly challenging or outstanding, but they're just sort of like big dumb monster types, and that could be fun. It doesn't necessarily speak to me personally as a DM, but I think there is definitely an opportunity here for high fantasy goofiness. So if that's what your party is into, then I think Golden Fields might make an adequate type of choice. That might be a good choice, a good fit for your party if that's what you're looking at. So that's Golden Fields. I do like the weird awakened tree that they have there. It's an interesting complex in terms of like just it's this huge like massive food factory type of thing. So that's cool too. Again, it's not my choice. Triboar is my choice, largely for the hooks that come out of it, but I also have the hooks with the Zents going into it, with Daratha Shendril, who is the current Lord Protector or whatever. She's a Harper, so I can also put Harper hooks into this thing. And that gets attacked by a couple fire giants and some orogs and orcs on axe beaks, which to me, the interesting opportunity here, like to make this fight fun, you have the opportunity to really engage the mounted combat rules. So if you have a party that wants to be on horseback and really have that sort of epic like run flanking maneuvers on horseback and that sort of thing, I think that's cool and interesting. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of structuring that encounter, is these orcs on axe beaks, maybe like fine-tuning that a little bit or making that really the centerpiece, and then these giants come in behind them, and so you've got the chaos of the buildings being set on fire. I don't know whether the players are going to care that the buildings are being set on fire, but I want there to be some sort of feeling of a potential consequence if they don't. I'm also considering, and we're going to talk about this more as we get closer to Chapter 2, but I'm also considering like having them dispense with the dual nature of the NPCs and having them play one of the other NPCs. And that sort of brings it around to one of the other considerations that I think we need to make here, which is all of these places don't give a lot of hooks or reasons for the players to go around, and they feel like this is a description of the place, of like as it stands. And there's a couple events of things that have happened recently, but it feels a little bit static to me. I think with Triboar being such a hub of caravans and scouts and guides, but particularly like the whole thing where everybody is like a bunch of horse ranchers, I think there's an opportunity to give the location some sort of event, which is the player's entryway into exploring the place. Maybe there's a rodeo or some sort of exhibition of horsemanship happening in Triboar. Maybe they're having a big auction where a bunch of rich, high rollers are in town. Or alternately, maybe that's just happened and the town is sort of recovering and tearing down from that to make the place feel sort of alive. But I think if you consider like giving some sort of special event or attaching some sort of special event to the town so that the players have the idea that there's life happening here that's not just every day around the wheel. I mean, you might be able to get by with Bryn Shander, like just being cold. We're just grinding it out here, guys, every day. We wake up, the sun shines for anywhere from 4 to 6 hours, and then it's just cold and dark and damp every single day. Like, there's something to be said for that too. And Golden Fields, maybe the harvest is going on, or they're having some sort of religious festival. That's certainly very appropriate. But think about like adding just a little bit of polish, a little bit of twist on when the players get there. Give them a reason to meet people that doesn't involve like, well, we'll go over to that weird looking inn and see what's going on. We've already got a place to stay, but maybe we should just go talk to her just to see. The town feels a little bit passive, although I think if I give Zent hooks to these guys, like you got to go deliver it to this particular person in town. If you look at Earlham Stockspool, he then gives them 3 quests, or up to 3 quests, to go do stuff around town. Because I kind of get the feeling that the player characters the party needs to spend some time in this location in order to get any kind of investment in defending this place or caring or whatever. So I think, look, there's a week-long auction and rodeo going on that you can be a part of, and your job is to siphon off, either pickpockets off of the dumb travelers who are there from out of town, the tourists who have come to do their business, or your job is to broker a deal on behalf of the Zentrum and make sure that they're getting their cut, or have the Harpers come in and monitor that there's no funny business going on, whatever the case may be. I want to give them a little bit of time in that particular location to get a feel for the town, to know some of the people of the town, and have a reason to defend the place. And also have a little bit of time to do some investigation of like, oh, okay, this giant monolith, I wonder what the deal is with that, etc. So that's those are my thoughts on where we're at. That's close to our hour, so I'm going to wrap it up. If somebody has a question about what I've talked about today, Dojima Detective says, I think adding in a commander-type enemy that your party knows nothing about makes that type of encounter a little more tense. So, I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly which type of encounter we were talking about, but I think that was talking about Golden Fields, where they're just kind of goofy, where the goofy giants are something bad is happening. I think in any case, like if there is a commander character, like that always like raises the stakes. Well, that's the guy that we got to go after. It's always, not always, but it is definitely an interesting focal point to give them somebody where if we take this guy out, the whole thing may unravel, and that's a fun. It's maybe a time-honored tradition, and maybe it's become a bit of a trope, but that doesn't mean that it's not a satisfying trope to exploit, especially if the party is overwhelmed. I mean, that could very well happen in the Duergar lair here, where if they get absolutely pummeled, the top dude shows up, and if they can take him out, then everybody else is like, oh, okay, well, let's get out of here. They got the boss. We have no reason to stay. So, all right. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining me today. I'm going to run this tomorrow and see what happens. I don't expect it will run at all like like I have laid out here, but that's part of the job of prepping, right? Is to think about what you have a pretty reasonably, confident take on what will happen, and then have a couple of hip pocket things for contingencies for what might happen. So that's the buzz. I will report back to you on Thursday. I'm back here Thursday at 4. Tonight, Tyler's playing some video games. I don't have the full schedule loaded up in the in my. Let me see if I can just pull it here quickly from my Dropbox. Let's see if I even have it. I don't think I do, though. So, yeah, I don't have it in here. All right. So, at any rate, you guys know where to find all of our stuff on social, and just follow us at Saving Throw Show on Twitter, and or follow me at Dungeon Bastard. And I will retweet most of the stuff anyhow. So I want to thank you guys for joining me. It was a great talk today. I think we have some interesting adventuring ahead of us. So I will be back here Thursday at 4 and let you all know how it all worked out. All right? Thank you. And until next time, let's dungeon!